Welcome to the last call on this election day. And actually, the day after election day. I'm sorry. I was like,
here you were telling me you were sober. I declined to believe that.
I've had anyway. I'm drinking a slightly different kind of Italian red, but sorry, I'm John Sweeney. I'm in London and in New York, drinking your usual Japanese gin and tonic.
That's right.
Yeah, and how do you feel? How's it going?
I feel pretty good. I see a lot of demoralization, bit of a whinge fest on Twitter. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't a landslide. They won't flip the Senate. Even a Biden presidency is going to be hamstrung by a Republican-controlled upper chamber and now a conservative Supreme Court. But look, I mean, that's like trying to save a patient on the table who's hemorrhaging whilst worrying about what sort of carb low diet he'll be on when he starts to recover. It's like, give me a fucking break. Like this is critical. Like, just get rid of the guy there.
So yes,
put
exactly.
This guy in his place, and then let's have the conversation. Even if it's paralyzed.
I don't fucking care that Joe's gaga, that he can't remember where the keys are. I don't care. Right. He has defeated the monster. Now, let's go through this a little bit because I'm anxious about a whole bunch of things, about Arizona, about has Joe actually, it feels like last night was awful. I went to bed. I was, if any of our listeners of very few watchers were watching the other night, we had really quite a session on Monday. So I went to bed on Tuesday at about 10, took my phone with me, just did a little bit of Twitter, and I had to do some recording for some proper work this morning. So I needed a good night's sleep, and I couldn't possibly get to sleep.
I conked out about 2:30 in the morning when things were not looking so good, and it was stalemated, and it seemed as though we were in for a very long and rough ride. But I actually think that it's going to be decided more quickly. I mean, Wisconsin was called by CNN about an hour ago for Biden. So that's a big win for him. That's part of the so-called blue wall.
And they've won Michigan as well, yeah?
They haven't won Michigan yet, but the trend lines are good because the majority of votes I think that remain to be counted are from Wayne County, which is urban Detroit. Also, I think Oakland County, which is one of the posher suburbs of Detroit, and those track blue. So
Detroit, that's Motown. And are there other black people in Motown?
That's where half my family live. My in-laws are in Oakland County in West Bloomfield. I've spent a lot of time in the great state of Michigan. You see a lot of Trump supporters, the signs on the lawn, but you also see a lot of Biden supporters there. And it would be a nice rebuke to this idea of the white working class reflexively going for Trump if Michigan came out for Biden. So I think if Biden wins Michigan, then all he requires is one more of the 4 or 5 outstanding states. So he could get Nevada and Michigan, that's the ball game. Or he could get, if he wins Pennsylvania, that would be a massive triumph. Although Pennsylvania doesn't matter at this point if he can secure Michigan.
So has he got Wisconsin?
He has, yeah.
Yeah, he's got Wisconsin in the bag. So all he needs, does he need one more state then?
No, I think he needs, assuming he gets Michigan, I believe he needs one. Yeah, he will need one more in addition to Michigan.
Is Arizona safe?
I don't know how, I mean, I haven't seen the latest. It seems to be fairly okay. I don't know what the margin is there. It could be.
The last time I checked, somebody was worrying about it on Twitter.
Everybody's always worrying about something on Twitter. I don't take that too seriously.
So it felt all right. So it looks as though if Joe gets Michigan and somewhere else like Nevada, it's okay. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, by the way, Georgia is still in contention because yet again, the votes that remain to be counted there come from predominantly Black communities or constituencies, which will tend to vote Democratic. And same for Pennsylvania. So you've got Philadelphia, and I forget what the other county is that's sort of blue within the state. So the population centers are the most crucial for these swing states, and the population centers are the ones where they're still tallying. And I see this as the last gasp of his idiotic authoritarianism. I mean, these kind of political statements. We're filing lawsuits in Michigan to halt the counting until we have access to what's going on, and they're trying to do the same thing in Wisconsin. Look, I mean, these states set their own parameters and their own laws and guidelines for vote tallying. And I don't see, I mean, even if it did go to the Supreme Court, we're not looking at, a recount because the margin is so small. In Wisconsin, it's 21,000 votes. So we're not talking 300 votes, 21,000. It's almost insurmountable. That's not, I mean, he can request a recount, he's already done, but it's, I think, unprecedented that disparity turns out to have been, well, it went for the other side.
And the other thing is that that he, my UK time, he pops up and says, "We won, but they stole it."
Well, yeah, but he was going to say that. He was saying that in essence before election day. Mail-in ballots are fraud.
But when
reports of voter intimidation are rampant.
But when the Cosa Nostra's Chris Christie says, sorry, can I say that? Sorry, I absolutely, there's no question, no suggestion Chris Christie is in any way connected with the New Jersey Mafia. However, when the former...
There is no New Jersey Mafia, okay? There wasn't in 20 years ago when The Sopranos was on air, and there isn't now. It's dead. So you can call him whatever you want. I mean, it's bollocks.
Okay, well, like,
you see, you're the kind of hard-bitten.
Not true.
The hard-bitten.
Hold on a second.
Lefty, the anti-woke lefty.
But hey, you're wrong. Back in the 1980s, which is so long, it's before you were born. There was such a thing as the New Jersey Mafia.
Yeah, then that was the 1980s.
Okay,
that's
all right.
A long time ago. It was
okay, by the way,
I mean,
that's
put the mob away is one Rudolph Giuliani before he became a fucking mobster himself, hanging out with the Ukrainian version of the pork store cabal.
Well, by the way,
he's gone to Philadelphia. He's the one who's going to be pushing.
Has he got his hand inside his trousers, or is he playing outside?
I have to say, just in the spirit of fairness, I watched the Borat sequel, and having been teased with this idea that Giuliani was jerking off on camera, if you watch the film, it does look like he's clearly making moves on the girl, but it does also look like, because he's kind of portly, he's got that 70-year-old paunch going, no offense. And he lays back on the bed. And it does look like he's trying. His hand is not fully down his pants, you see.
Yes.
But was he jerking off, or was he just simply unmiking himself?
So my ex, who hates him with a passion, said exactly the same thing. Anyway, so that's noted. So anyway, going back to the election proper, you don't think that Trump is going to inveigle his way in, back in, because in the way that George W. did in a slightly dodgy way from Florida?
I think with W, wasn't it the case was about stopping the recount at a certain point.
Yeah.
But not stopping the counting of the first round counting, which is essentially what Trump is trying to do now. So that is a bridge too far, even for the Republican cult that has propped him up and defended him. And I don't think any.
So let's explain this. So let's explain this exactly. What happened in 2000 was that there was Al Gore versus George W., the vote was, there was really a very, very small margin. This time it's, Joe's got like a couple of million more votes already.
Not a million, because statewide I mean, like Wisconsin, again, Trump can petition for a recount, and if he hasn't already, but it's 21,000 votes. It's going to be hard for him to make up that number. We're not talking 300, 400, or even 1,500.
He can get fancy lawyers to say 20, 30, 40, 50, 200, 500, 1,000 people have got their votes wrong.
Right. So fine, do a recount. But if the recount is between 18,000 and 21,000, or more likely 19,000 and 21,000, Biden wins. So Michigan is the one to watch, but Biden seems to be, his lead has been steady throughout. And as I say, I mean, the votes remaining to be counted are the ones that are likely going to go into his column. So I think he's okay there. Georgia is a bit of a squeaker. I mean, Pennsylvania, Trump is leading by, I think, over 100,000 votes, last I checked. But again, look,
there's
where
1.5 million votes which haven't been put in yet, yeah?
Right. So the math that I heard was Biden needed to win, of the outstanding ballots to be counted, Biden needed 2/3 to eclipse Trump. But again, he doesn't need to win Pennsylvania to get to 270 electoral votes. So Biden's path has multiple paths to victory. Trump has fewer, which is good.
There's another thing, and it may be my observation, I may be wrong. It feels like that Biden's machine is more street, is more working class, is less posh. Anyway, they're having learned from Hillary's mistake. They know where to fight, and they're good.
Well, he's got educated whites. He's getting more of the white working class vote, which is to be expected given his origin story, and that he's not Hillary Clinton. But the real surprise of this whole thing so far has been Trump outperforming expectation with minorities, both with blacks, but especially with Latinos. So you've got Miami-Dade County, a heavy Cuban American community, which appears to have been sold on the argument that the Democratic Party, if not quite embodied by Joe Biden, then it embodied by the squad and the Democratic Socialists and the Bernie Bros and all the rest of it. It's Castroist tyranny all over again, brought to America's shores. So they took that and they ran with it. And then I think there's also the element of identity politics. Latino voters in America can be socially conservative on some things, and frankly, the thing I'm most interested to see is how much wokeness and the kind of police discourse that you see discussed a lot on social media impacted the Latino vote. So for instance, Latinos who don't like the idea of some Ivy League educated bourgeois white kid living in his parents' basement saying, oh, no, you should be called Latinx. Fuck off. I mean, like they would probably, they reject that. And then that leads them to say, well, we don't like Donald Trump on so many other things, but at least he is fighting this rampant scourge of political correctness or wokeness, as it's now known. So I'm curious to see what the data will be on that. And he also did very well with Latinos in Texas too, because there was a brief flickering moment in which Democrats thought they were going to flip Texas, and they didn't.
I feel as somebody who very much admired Dennis Healy, who was a beach master at Anzio, as somebody who is, I'm either in British politics, a Liberal Democrat or sensible Labour. I feel this moment is that I think Joe's going to win, and I think it's going to be okay. But I would like to say to the Bernie Sanders people and all of them, you do realize that your fucking piety means that you have turned off an awful lot of people who would naturally be Democrat, but they're not because they don't like your aggressive culture wars. And I feel more impassioned. This has fueled my my passion to say, listen, when you say things which are, when you push things into the mouths and faces of ordinary working class people who are good people, and they find it frightening and offensive, watch what you're doing, because you lock in the right or the far right in Trump's case, because I think he's more on the far right division than the right. And from now on, progressive politics, radical, decent politics, requires us to police the wilder edge of this stuff. We've got to argue with these people.
There is a tone deafness on the part of the hard to kind of moderately mushy left, and certainly the Bernie loyalists. I mean, for instance, Bernie's foreign policy advisor at one point tweeted out, "Neither Maduro nor Trump." And if you're part of the Venezuelan diaspora living, which is increasing in number demographically in the United States, actually, no, you prefer Trump to Maduro.
Yes.
So again, it's this cloth-earedness that, oh, we're in the third camp about this stuff. Like we don't necessarily align with a socialist, authoritarian, and kleptocratic regime, but we also hate the guy here. And by the way, I can tell you, having covered the Syrian civil war for almost a decade, quite a lot of Syrian Americans who voted for Trump and support Trump loudly. Why? Not because he's, welcoming of Muslims or Syrian or Arab Americans. I mean, we know where he stands on that, but because he killed Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Quds Force of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. He bombed Assad's chemical weapons facility, which didn't have much of a tangible impact on the fate of the war, but was at least a show of force that he was willing to enforce Obama's notoriously unenforced red line. And yeah, I mean, that's enough. And like I said to you, remember 2 days ago, given the media I consume, which I rate to be at least more informative than ultra ideological right-wing media, meaning the Breitbarts, the Fox News, the Daily Caller, the Federalist. Hang on, let me finish the thought. Where I have seen a complete and utter failure, derogation of duty, is to be told or to have it explained to me how the other side, people who do not share my politics, how they think and what they feel. And this election, I think, is yet another reflection of the fact that those of us who sit in our ivory towers or in our little bubbles of, fine, I'll use the word elitism, on either coast, don't know what the fuck is going on in the rest of the country. Our compatriots they might as well be from Mars to us. And that is a huge problem. And it's manifested it's a result of the fact that local news has died off. I mean, how many regional local newspapers have been shuttered simply because they can't compete with the age of digital technology news? And it's also a reflection of the fact that, wish casting has become, it is true, there is a valid critique of journalism that confirmation bias tends to eclipse solid empirical fact finding, which is what you and I are meant to be doing as hacks, right? And I've seen it. I've seen it from inside major news organizations and institutions, and it usually takes the form of an editor telling someone, go out and find me this story, or prop up this narrative. It happens all the time.
No, I think it is somebody goes outside and says, it's not like what we think it is, and they don't want to say it to the boss. Well, I don't want to run that story. Well, that's what people think.
Right.
And so it's a kind of, you send somebody out there, and then the person who goes out there says, well, it's not quite right. By the way, covered in glory, there's I hate Iowa with a passion. In Des Moines, I did a film for Panorama about Mitt Romney, and I ended up, I think, in 2012, New Year's Eve 2012, in the Holiday Inn in Des Moines, Iowa. and they closed. I wanted a drink. We've been working late. It's New Year's Eve, and they came in and they said you cannot have a drink after midnight, i.e. the moment of midnight on New Year's Eve in a fancy hotel. I apologize if it's not. I withdraw a fancy hotel in Des Moines, Iowa, not very fancy, BBC money. The hotel manager and a police officer said you can't carry on drinking. We had a small party in there. And I turned to the hotel manager and said, you know what this place reminds me of? The Islamic Republic of Iran.
In Iowa.
Anyway, the Des Moines Register had a poll and they got the numbers for what happened exactly right, i.e. that nationally, Joe's got like 2% ahead of Trump. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, look.
And anyway, so that local newspaper, the Des Moines Register, and the pollsters there got it right. I understand how difficult it is to do polls with people who actually don't want to express their own political preference. It's a very, very hard thing to do.
Well, but also, you know, there's this cognitive dissonance in this country. You know, I was talking to Tom Nichols, who we had on the show back in April. Yeah. Who, to my mind, is the shrewdest never Trumper, now former Republican. Because I like to check in with him. What's your sort of state of play? How do you analyze the situation?
I thought I was almost. It made me my eyes were brimming full, almost with tears, when I read this stuff. I cannot believe, said Tom Nichols, that my country is supporting this guy.
Yeah, no, and Tom is very good at cutting through the cant and the bullshit and the sort of happy feeling forms of political punditry and saying, I think half the country is fucking nuts and morally degenerate, because apologetics for sociopathy is its own form of sociopathy. Yeah. And, you know, he's very straight about this stuff. But hang on, you know, so what I wanted to know from him, though, is, I mean, you're talking about, you know, getting it right. I said, you know, the complete and utter failure of polling in this country. I mean, we had presented Nate Silver as this kind of messianic figure after the Obama sweep in 2008. I said, but is this really surprising? Because we're now in a state or a condition in which you've got a sizable chunk of the American electorate that legitimately believes that the US government is run by a cabal of satanic pedophiles, and that Donald Trump is doing metaphysical war against this dark and sinister conspiracy all the time. Now, these are people who, when somebody rings them up in their home and it starts asking them questions like, well, what matters to you? Is it COVID-19, the economy, wokeness, Black Lives Matter? Do you expect these people to give you a sane and sensible or even candid reply, to have them express a scientifically quantifiable sociological gloss on the country? I mean, it's like querying flat earthers and expecting to have a real understanding of what the hell is going on and what people genuinely believe. So of course polling has failed. People lie. People are full of conspiracy theories. They misrepresent reality to themselves and to others. This is not a shock to me.
However, and this is why I'm virtually at death's door, but I want to get into politics, because every now and then a Tommy Robinson supporter comes up to me and says, yeah. And I engage. I'm not a shy person. And I have a go, and I say things like, "You're either a Nazi or a cunt. Which is it?" And they and weirdly, they get and a kind of Jack Nicholson.
By the way, the area of congruence in that Venn diagram is quite large.
Okay. So what I'm saying,
it's not an either or question.
Oh, no. But what I'm going for is that I am not a timid man, and I am defending. and I can engage with them. And more often than not, I feel as though I have changed their minds about me a little bit, maybe not completely, but a little bit, so that therefore there is something dark and wrong about social media, because it prevents people almost from changing their mind. And I feel you're absolutely right about the. Anyway, what I want to be able to do is to make the argument to, for example, in Britain, to the white working class, who feel that Brexit is their best political economic policy for a better life. They're wrong. And I want to make that argument. But actually, people, the Blairites and so forth, have just said, you're racist and stupid to do so. No. I kind of think there is now an imperative for people on our side of the argument to try and talk to these people who aren't listening to us.
Yeah, and that's borne out by the mass. I mean, like, look, you know, you've got a case. I can't give you the county by county breakdown of this, but people who voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012, who supported Donald Trump in 2016, probably would have preferred, say, Bernie Sanders winning the nomination in 2020. I mean, this stuff is transferable, you know. You can align with different ideological actors if they're speaking to your interests, or at least addressing your core grievances and what affects you the most, which usually is economic matters, right? But the cultural component of this has been understated in this election. I was wrong. I really thought nobody's going to give a shit about, you know, Ted Cruz's little caravan of commies led by Joe Biden. I thought nobody's going to give a shit about the 1619 Project at the New York Times winning a Pulitzer Prize. Nobody's going to give a shit about campus life, you know, feeling to some kind of Maoist totalitarian regime. I mean, which is all that you see on social media, these arguments, you know, open letters signed against cancel culture, and then open letters signed against the open letter. And it's a total cacophony, exacerbated by technology. I really didn't think any of that was going to matter as much as we lost our job. We lost grandma and grandpa, who we couldn't even bury in the ground, be there physically because of this plague. You know, America is spent, it's exhausted, and we need a change. All of that, all the materialist interest that governs my worldview, because I do have little Marxian tendencies, don't tell anyone. All of that just, I think, was like pissing in the wind, because I think Trump made this a close election by selling the cultural component, which, by the way, was the one insight Steve Bannon bequeathed to him, and that I think has proven to be correct in both electoral cycles.
So I feel, for the moment, we think and we hope and we pray. I say this as a former altar boy, that Joe's won. Joe's won the argument, but it was close. And all of us on Joe's side of the argument, on the Democrat, on the Labour, on the Liberal side, have got to say to ourselves, why has Brexit happened? Why did Trump do so well? Trump did well he won in 2016, and he almost won this time. Why is that? Because we have not, because the culture wars frighten people in a way, really way more than we can think, and we've got to govern our own side and say, hey, come on, you've got to think carefully about how far you push people, because the consequence is that someone like Trump will fill the space.
Yeah, but also it's this kind of infinite cycle of forgetfulness or what they call a memory hole. I mean, how many times, how many elections have there been where the core assumptions of what were driving people to the polls to vote, usually for the Democrat, let's say, proved to be false, right? You know, what, 20 years ago, there's a very good book called What's the Matter with Kansas, which was all about exactly this. Why are white working class people voting for Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush or George W. Bush? Why are they voting for conservatives when it behooves them, it is in their own economic interest to vote for the Democrat whose policies will carry them aloft? And now the real question is, what's the matter with people who keep asking, what's the matter with Kansas? How many times do you have to be convinced that there are other factors at play here? I'm talking about the American situation. I'm not necessarily, I mean, you know, we like to conflate the UK and Brexit with Trump, and I, you know, that only goes up to a point, Lord Copper. But there is something here in our culture, in our society, which you know, again, the people who are paid very well to try and figure out these things and to try and forecast the way plebiscites and elections are meant to go, keep getting it wrong. And there has to be a reckoning at some point, because otherwise, this is actually, I mean, it becomes a self-perpetuating crisis, because one of the things that drives people to vote for Donald Trump is Donald Trump says you can't trust the experts and you can't trust the media. They're lying to you and they're selling you a bill of goods dressed up as objective news when in fact it's an ideological agenda. And we keep fucking it up and people keep believing that. It starts to appear convincing.
Right now, we've been talking for 45 minutes, and we've all been, I completely get it, because it's the thing that most makes me anxious. And the massive ex-Catholic guilt, and you're doing your half ex-Catholic, half Jewish anxiety thing. However, let's, for the last 5 minutes or so, let's look at the other side of the argument. Granddad, who can't remember where he put the keys, who's beaten the psychopath, and that's fucking wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, and look, I mean, again, it shows you just how anticlimactic a time we're living in. I mean, Joe Biden, if the current model holds, when all is said and done, will have won the Electoral College, the popular vote, and not exactly a consolation prize, won more votes than any other presidential candidate in American history. That's a neat hat trick, yeah?
Yeah.
Any other set of circumstances, any other time in American history, that's a massive triumph. And we're all sitting here with our little drizzle of complaint and negativity. Oh, well, we didn't get this, we didn't get that.
No. I love him. I love him.
You can't discount that. And you also can't, I mean, look, there were factors working against him. I happen to think, and this, you know, Tom Nichols said this very forcefully to me, Kamala Harris added nothing, zero to this platform. Nothing, zilch.
That's true. He should have gone, I'm afraid to say, he should have gone.
But playing it down the center and playing it safe, and most important, not listening to social media on any of this. If he's eked it out by the end of it, fine. You know, that's all I wanted, and that's what I'll take. I don't need an embarrassment of riches here. I just need to, as I said before, with my lurid metaphor, staunch the bleeding before I start coming up with homeopathic remedies to prolong life and, you know, deliver paradise on earth. I mean, give me a fucking break. This is a nation in crisis, you know. End the crisis and then have the debate or the conversation about what direction to take.
But I'm excited. Like, there was stuff about like the little wankers in Britain going on about, well, they're like the Senate will still be Republican. Well, I don't care. Also, Joe was in the Senate for years and years and years, and he'll find people like Mitt Romney and other whatever, whoever. He'll find people on the Republican side who he can do deals with, who he can say, okay, normal politics, we will try and do something here.
This guy was much more conciliatory or accommodationist as a senator, and you know, there are certain things that a Democratic president can do with a Republican-led Senate. I mean, far more, he's got far more potential than Barack Obama ever did, because Barack Obama didn't like horse trading. He didn't really like politics. He liked his own appeal and his own sort of anointed candidacy. But the dirty sort of Lyndon Johnson-esque components, he found anathema.
I mean, I do find. I mean, I've the Cato's books about whatever is it Cato, what LBJ?
Caro, Robert Caro
got a new society, and essentially he ended segregation in American politics in the way it had been before, was a brilliant piece of dirty, low-down politics.
Yeah.
He lifted all of American society,
right, by playing rough, which is what you have to do. The bricks and mortar aspect of American or just democratic politics. The other thing I wanted to mention before we cut off is, there's this thesis going around that this proves Trumpism is here to stay. So sort of like, I mean,
bollocks.
Well, look, populism is here to stay, but then again, populism predated Donald Trump. Trumpism without Trump, though, doesn't exist, because here's the thing: who becomes the standard bearer for this platform? Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton is a hall monitor with no charisma and no real political savvy in the way that Trump has got. The best Tom Cotton can do is get canceled by the New York Times, right? Which is a kind of negative attribute, not a positive. I don't see somebody coming into the fore with the same kind of brash, smash mouth style of campaigning and attacking, calling women pigs and referring to their menstrual cycles as a form of I just don't see that. There's nobody waiting in the wings for that role. And so therefore, Trumpism, which is founded really on a cult of personality, is going to wither and die. And the Republican Party, this is my one prophecy, and I'll completely own it if I've got it wrong. Republican Party, the minute this guy is escorted from the White House and sort of waves and, Marine One takes him off into God knows where, like Jackson Hole, Florida, whatever the fuck. The Republican Party is going to blink and sort of pretend like it never happened. It is going to repudiate this legacy quietly. It's not going to have, we sort of strain the metaphor of totalitarian history, but it's sort of like the death of Stalin without Khrushchev's secret speech. They're not going to own the last 4 years. They're going to pretend, what was that all about? Marco Rubio, who is a catch-penny opportunist and a hack, is going to run for president as John McCain's intellectual and moral successor. Mark my words. Lindsey Graham, who started out as a never Trumper Republican, who told me in a panel I moderated that he was on, well, I don't understand why we can't just kick him out the party like they do in the UK, who is now the biggest lickspittle of the Republican Party. Lindsey Graham is going to pretend Donald Trump never happened. Watch, mark my words. They're going to try and reset the clock to being an establishment, normal political party, and they're going to try to find alternatives to all of this because they know the damage that was wrought by it.
I think you're right, but I would put this, that if I'm a smart and clever Republican who, for example, has been a soldier in Iraq and Afghanistan, I would try and become Khrushchev and do the secret speech. The future leader of the new Republican thing is somebody who says Trump was wrong. Out of no, I may be wrong about that. However, anyway, listen, we've been going on for too long, and I need to eat something. I felt, honestly, I had my worst night's sleep for a year last night. What was annoying was I was in bed, but I was on my phone, and I kept on charging my phone and going, wow, 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 wow. I kept on. The news got dark and dark and darker, and finally I fell asleep, and I woke up, And then there's this sort of stuff about he's doing much better. Joe's doing much better in the Midwest. And then when the Green Bay Fudge Packers, is that the correct name? I'm not sure. By the way, that's
you could run for president. You could come here and be like, the disgruntled grandpa, anti-woke lefty.
I know it's a joke. I fucking love those people.
The Fudge Packers,
they play football when it's like they beat everybody else because it's like in.
That's just the Midwest, man.
I don't know, but it's very cold.
Go to a Michigan tailgate. You'll see. It's the same there as well.
I did a long time ago. Last story, and then we go. I did a story with Len Fried, who's a wonderful Magnum photographer for The Observer, about neo-Nazis in Milwaukee, which is in Michigan, yeah? And
Milwaukee? No.
Where's Milwaukee?
Milwaukee is in, yes.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, it was bloody cold. It was winter, and it was cold. I had a big hat and I had a big beard, and Len and I got in with these neo-Nazis in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they said to me, and they played Adolf Hitler LPs. It was in the late 80s. And they had baseball bats with nails, and they were neo-Nazis. And I started asking them some tough-ish questions. And one of them turned to me and said, "Hey, this guy looks Jewish," because I had a hat and a beard and everything. And the temptation to say, "Well, I'm not Jewish, but he is," i.e. Len Fried. Oh my God! I didn't do it. Anyway, we got out of there. I calmed them down. We got the pictures. I taped everything on my old-fashioned tape recorder, and we got out. And then Len turned to me on the steps of the neo-Nazi house in Wisconsin and said, "Well, Jew boy, let's go for a drink."
You see, this is the
what I said to the Nazis was, I'm not Jewish, I'm Catholic. And it was like,
that could be worse depending on where you are in Middle America. Now, have you gone to Texas, and have you ever met Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys? Kinky Friedman, I think, ran for governor of Texas.
As a young as a student,
you can embody the identity so long as you are willing to co-opt the cultural accoutrement of the neighborhood.
As a student,
Jewish cowboy, it exists.
Gosh, as a student at the London School of Economics, I hitchhiked.
Every time I hear someone open a sentence with that line, I reach for my gun, by the way. So that is the most liberal elitist thing I've ever heard. Okay. As a student of the London School of Economics.
Excuse me, in 1977, I hitchhiked. I flew to New York, hung out with a friend of mine, went down to New Orleans, and then hitchhiked down the New Jersey Turnpike all the way to New Orleans, and then across to Austin, Texas, where I bought a pair of shorts on which was printed "Nowhere else was Texas," nowhere else but Texas. I got badly sunburnt, took the bus to LA, and then hitched from LA to San Francisco, from San Francisco back to New York. I ended up in the South Bronx, and I went into a bar with my shorts. I had a t-shirt and shorts with "Nowhere else but Texas" on them, the bar was completely black. And I can remember thinking, "Hello," and I just said, "Hello, chaps. Can I have a cup of tea?" And everybody laughed, and it was fine, and nobody, and I was fine, and I got out. But so what's the point of this fucking story? I can't. So
if there's a theme to what you've been saying in the last hour, it's exactly that. I mean, I am both fascinated by and horrified by the prospect of you, like in the nursing home, drooling from your chin, because it's not going to be like, oh, during the war we had to ration. It's going to be like, and then I ran into this guy from the IRA, right? And he put a drill bit to my head. And I said, fuck off. Next thing you know, we're sharing a pint in the pub. It's just going to be like this weird sort of melange of foreign hack, war zone, Sweeney's sojourns through America.
Anyway,
in counterintuitive clothing. It's like, you're like Oscar Wilde going down the mine pit without the wit.
I've remembered what the point might have been, which is that Joe gets it right when Joe said America is bigger than this. And today, fingers crossed, America being bigger than the sum of its parts has said goodbye to the monster. And for that, Michael Weiss, the United States of America, thank you very much. Cheers. You've been listening to The Last Call. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.